Part 101. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1001. Chapter 1001 The Queen's Tai Chi. Looking at Queen Zhen 11's somewhat shocked look, Fan Qinjiao looked at her red and swollen forehead with tears in her eyes. She rubbed herself against Queen Zhen 11's feet and pulled the hem of Queen Zhen 11's skirt pitifully. The daughter-in-law has never told the Queen Mother, just because she is afraid that the Queen Mother will be worried. But now that the Emperor asks about it, the daughter-in-law dare not hide anything. She also asks the Queen Mother to make the decision for the daughter-in-law. His Royal Highness is so entangled with the daughter-in-law's cousin. Where have you left your daughter-in-law again? Queen Zhen 11 didn't expect to eat a big melon as soon as she arrived, and she couldn't hide the surprise in her eyes. She knew that even if Fan Qinjiao was trying to perfunctory the Emperor, it was impossible for him to tell nonsense. Otherwise, with the Emperor's caution, he could find out the truth with a single investigation. So, that boy Feng Ming really caused a scandal? Emperor Yongchang looked at the Queen's expression and saw that the surprise in the Queen's eyes was not fake, so the suspicion in his heart was reduced a bit. Empress Zhen 11 suppressed the surprise in her heart, and then softened her tone a little and said, even if the prince really has something to do with your cousin, it is your cousin's blessing. Since you are the prince, you still have this kind of tolerance. Yes, if you are really so jealous, wouldn't it be a discredit to the royal family? Fan Qinjiao lowered his head, pretending to be very reluctant, but had to nod in agreement. The mother is right. The daughter-in-law has been worried about this, so she has kept this matter in her heart. I thought that when His Royal Highness gets angry, His Highness will pay more attention to his daughter-in-law. Unexpectedly, His Highness is even neglecting his father because he is angry with his daughter-in-law. These words seemed to be a complaint, but in fact they told the Queen briefly and concisely what happened. Queen Zhen 11 was actually a little surprised. After all, her son knew better and would not have made such a low-level mistake. But since Fan Qinjiao said this, Queen Zhen 11 finally felt confident. Turning around, she brought the old duck soup in front of the Emperor. Queen Zhen 11 looked at the Emperor and said, I have been cooking it all morning today. Your Majesty, try it while it's hot. Even though Emperor Yongchang had no appetite, he didn't want to offend the Queen. He opened it and took a few sips, then put down the spoon and motioned for the Queen to sit down. He looked at the Queen and said, it's hard for the Queen to be interested. Empress Zhen 11 sighed, the younger generations are not sensible. I have to worry about the Emperor's dragon body. Don't worry, Your Majesty. I will teach the prince well. How can I just ignore everything just because of the love between my children? There was no anger on Emperor Yongchang's face. Instead, he persuaded the Queen, the prince is probably annoyed by the princess's troubles. That's what the Emperor said, Empress Zhen 11 said with a smile, but she had already rolled her eyes in her heart. Since the prince became sensible, the Emperor has been on guard against the prince, fearing that the prince would sit on the chair in advance. Now the Emperor is happier than anyone else that the prince is not doing his job properly. Old scumbag, he is indeed a scumbag. But speaking of that cousin, I think it doesn't matter if there's one more woman or one less. But I heard that the princess's cousin was in a merchant's house. A woman from such a small family, I'm afraid it's the same. If you can't afford any big scenes, you can just kill time, Queen Zhen 11 said softly. Emperor Yongchang did not nod or shake his head. He just looked at Fan Qinjiao, who was kneeling on the ground, and said, no matter what happens to the prince, you still have to abide by your duty. Fan Qinjiao nodded quickly and said, what my father taught me is that my daughter-in-law has realized her mistake. Emperor Yongchang waved his hand again, indicating that Fan Qinjiao could retreat. After Fan Qinjiao knelt down, he stood up and exited the hall. Fan Qinjiao didn't let out a long breath until he walked out of the yard. I had long thought that the Emperor would be suspicious, but I didn't expect that the emperor's suspicion seemed to be more serious than before. If it weren't for the queen's help, it would be difficult to convince the emperor. But thinking about the excuse she just made, Fan Kinjao was afraid that the empress would have questions. With this in mind, Fan Kinjao went directly to the empress palace. When Queen Zhen 11 saw Fan Kinjao leaving, she stayed with the emperor for a while before getting up and leaving. Emperor Yongchang looked at the queen's back and waited until the queen's figure completely disappeared before he said, "By Tuesday." Bai Tu quickly came over and said, "I'm here, my servant." Emperor Yongchang narrowed his eyes slightly and ordered, "Let the people from Longjian go check and see what the prince is doing." Bai Tu's heart skipped a beat, and he lowered his head and said, "Yes, I will do it now." Longjian was trained by the emperor to investigate various matters for the emperor. The people within him usually hide very well and do not interact with anyone. Bai Tu first went to Longjian and conveyed the emperor's message. Then when walking back, he quietly turned into a small alley and blew the whistle in his sleeve. Not long after, a young hurried in. Bai Tu looked at the visitor, whispered to the little in a low voice, and then walked out of the alley as if nothing had happened. On the other side, Fan Kinjao had just had a sip of tea at the queen's palace when he saw the queen leaving and returning. As soon as they met, before Fan Kinjao stood up to say hello, Queen Zhen 11 pressed her shoulder and asked, "What's going on with that cousin of yours?" Empress Zhen 11 still understood Fan Kinjao's character. Even if it was really to stop the emperor's doubts, she would never talk nonsense. So, that cousin is afraid that she will really be with Feng Ming. Empress Zhen 11 thought so, and her heart became even heavier. Fan Kinjao looked at the queen and said, "Actually, this matter has nothing to do with His Highness the Crown Prince." Queen Zhen 11 was stunned. "Please tell me carefully and listen." Since Fan Kinjao originally planned to use this excuse to dispel the suspicion in the emperor's heart, he knew that he could not hide it from the empress, so he simply told himself what Wu Qiuzhao said and repeated it to the empress. "Queen Zhengzi. What a courage! Sure enough, she is the daughter of a small businessman, but she is so ignorant. How can she influence the prince's ideas?" Empress Zhen 11 scolded her with a cold face. Although it is common to have 3 wives and 4 concubines in Ziliang, from the moment she became a biological wife, those around the emperor have never stopped. Empress Zhen 11 could not prevent her son from taking concubines in the future, but now a little yellow-haired girl dared to do things under her nose and sow discord between her son and daughter-in-law. It was simply audacious. Fan Kinjao didn't expect that the queen would be so angry. After all, he still felt sorry for her. He felt warm in his heart, so he took the initiative to take the queen's hand and said, "My daughter-in-law didn't take this matter to heart, and my mother didn't take it to heart either. Just don't get angry." Empress Zhen 11 lowered her eyes slightly and looked at her hand held by Fan Kinjao. She felt that this child was too sensible. Her mother is married to someone else. She is afraid that no one will talk to her about what is in her heart, so she has to endure it. Now she is still trying to persuade her. This means that she really regards her as her biological mother. "What are your plans for this matter?" Queen Zhen 11 asked, suppressing her anger. "My daughter-in-law always feels that this matter is not as simple as it seems. Cousin Lishan will never be so bold for no reason, so my daughter-in-law is already being watched secretly, and we will wait until we see it later," Fan Kinjao said. Empress Zhen 11 nodded and praised Fan Kinjao's calmness. "The queen knows that you are a good boy. Don't worry, as long as the queen is here, I will never let you suffer any injustice." Fan Kinjao smiled and said, "My daughter-in-law thanked my mother." "Queen, concubine Lu Shu wants to see you." Lily suddenly walked in and said. "Concubine Lu Shu?" Empress Zhen 11 frowned, obviously a little surprised. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1002. Chapter 1002. The Queen's Counteruse. When Fan Kinjao saw this, he took the initiative to stand up and leave. No matter why concubine Lushu met the queen, she could not stay here any longer. At this time, concubine Lushu was standing in the courtyard. She saw Fan Kinjao coming out. After thinking about it, she took the initiative to come over. I didn't expect that the crown princess was also there. It seems that I came at the wrong time. Fan Kinjao looked at concubine Lushu and said, I was called by the queen mother to lecture me. Speaking of which, I have to thank concubine Lushu, otherwise I don't know how long I will be scolded by the queen mother. After hearing this, concubine Lushu looked at the expression of the crown princess, but Fan Kinjao always had a faint smile on his face, so she could not see any clues. Fan Kinjao couldn't see how concubine Lushu was sizing her up. She didn't look like she was sincerely coming to discuss matters with the queen, but more like she was here to talk to the queen. Thinking of this, Fan Kinjao said, I hope concubine Lushu can express her condolences regarding the second prince's concubine. Although concubine Lushu seems to have nothing to rely on, sometimes having a sincere heart is better than anything else. As soon as the words fell, Fan Kinjao left first. She also reminded concubine Lushu out of consideration for the former second prince's concubine. Now that concubine Lushu no longer has the second prince and concubine around her, the value that concubine Lushu can use for the queen is even less. If concubine Lushu can be brave enough, she is really thinking about the empress. With the kindness of the empress, she will definitely be able to protect concubine Lushu. But if concubine Lushu is still thinking about something that shouldn't be done, don't blame her. The queen is heartless. Of course Lushufei didn't understand what Fan Kinjao meant. If she could really understand, she wouldn't let herself live as carefully as she does today. Seeing Beihe come out, concubine Lushu calmed down her mood and followed through the door. As soon as she saw the queen, she knelt on the ground and cried bitterly, the second prince is confused. He listened to concubine Han Xian's words and became confused. I stood beside the third prince in a daze. I wanted to ask the second prince to persuade him, but I didn't expect the second prince to persuade me, but, the queen, my life is hard. Empress Zhen 11 calmly picked up the teacup beside her and said with a half-smile when she heard these words, if life is hard, some of the women in the harem have not even met the emperor until now. Compared with them, concubine Lushu is quite lucky. Along the way, she had never been covered in injuries and blood, but now she was being pitted and sold on her head. It really made her sick to her stomach just to look at it. Concubine Lushu can just say what she wants. I will accompany you and you for lunch later. Queen Zhen 11 took a sip from the teacup and continued. Concubine Lushu knelt on the ground and quietly looked at the queen's expression. After a while, she said, my heart is actually towards the queen, but now the second prince, the queen is the master of the harem. If the queen comes forward, she will definitely meet her. Let the second prince change his mind. Empress Zhen 11 smiled coldly and asked her to come forward to persuade the second prince. It was a shame that concubine Lushu could think of it. Are you treating her as a fool? Let's not talk about whether she can really win over the second prince. Even if she is really sure, she will never do such a thing. The second prince has no power and influence, but he just takes advantage of the prince. It's just status. If the second prince is obedient and willing to submit, she won't turn him away, but let her go and invite. How is that possible? Concubine Lushu saw that the queen didn't speak for a long time, so she asked tentatively, what worries does the queen have? Concubine Lushu also knows that the second prince has been relatively close to the third prince recently. Even if I have the intention to win him over, it is not just a matter of words. This matter needs to be discussed in the long term. Besides, I have also been doing this recently. I'm upset and angry, Queen Zhen 11 said with a bitter and resentful expression. Concubine Lushu was stunned and quickly said, the queen is the master of the harem. Who dares to make the queen unhappy? Empress Zhen 11 sighed and said, This matter is not very honorable to say. The crown princess's cousin has been very close to the crown prince recently. You also know that the crown princess has not married the crown prince yet, and then she saw the crown prince with other people. Women will naturally feel uncomfortable if they are involved. Concubine Lu Shu had indeed heard about the existence of this cousin from the second prince's concubine. Now after hearing the queen's words, she began to think about it. I heard that the cousin is just a girl from a small family and has no one to rely on in the main city. Thinking of this, concubine Lu Shu took the initiative and said, "Why does the queen need to worry about such a trivial matter? Besides, the queen has great blessings, so this matter can be solved quickly." Empress Zhen 11 glanced at concubine Lu Shu meaningfully, then smiled and said, "I hope so." Concubine Lu Shu came here this time to use the queen's hand to bring the second prince back to her. Now that she has finished what she needs to say, there is no need to stay here any longer, and she said a few words of good luck. The words are to kneel down. Bei personally escorted concubine Lu Shu out of the house, and when she came back, she said, "I actually want to ask the queen to drag the second prince back to her." How could concubine Lu Shu think of this? Empress Zhen 11 snorted and said, "Concubine Lu Shu has always had a soft temper, and is very foresighted. In the past, there was a second prince who helped her, but now she is the only one left. Since she doesn't want to offend concubine you, she also if you want your son to come back, you have to shamelessly ask me." Lily sighed, "The queen really plans to." Queen Zhen 11 smiled coldly and said, "Do I look like someone who has been taken advantage of? Her own son is too busy, so how can she have time to help other people's sons think about anything?" However, since concubine Lu Shu begged her, she couldn't ask for it in vain. She couldn't come forward to punish Fan Qinjiao's cousin, but it was okay to teach him some lessons with the help of concubine Lu Shu. Fan Qinjiao didn't know that the queen was actually trying to vent her anger, because as soon as she left the queen's palace, she was stopped by Xiaoxian. She followed Xiaoxian all the way to the entrance of the palace and got on the carriage. That is, he saw Bailey Fengming sitting among them. At this time, Bailey Fengming was sitting on the sofa, supporting his cheek with one hand and not knowing what he was thinking about. His calm and indifferent appearance exuded an air of elegance, as if even if the sky fell, he would still have enough energy. Be sure to strategize. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Bailey Fengming followed the sound. When he saw Fan Qinjiao, he stretched out his hand towards her and said, "Come here." Fan Qinjiao held his hand and let him pull her to sit next to him, and then said, "Where are we going?" Bailey Fengming had a faint smile between his brows, rubbed her hair and said softly, "I'll take you out to play." Fan Qinjiao. "Your Highness the Crown Prince is really interested." Seeing her slanderous look, Bailey Fengming couldn't help but smile softly and said, "Although you and your mother are dealing with your father's side, I'm afraid my father's temperament wouldn't be so easy if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes." Believe. It was only then that Fan Qinjiao reacted, "Have you calculated it a long time ago? It's not really a big deal, it's just to understand my father's thoughts. Since I wanted to track down Tang Juwei's whereabouts during this period, I inevitably neglected my father's side. My father's suspicion naturally made me suspicious. It's better to let the suspicion come to an end and then find a way to dispel it." His dark eyes exuded a faint light when he spoke. They were so beautiful and attractive, gentle and harmless, but if you look closely, you can see the unfathomable depth hidden in them. Fan Qinjiao thought it was a coincidence that the emperor asked her to question her, but he didn't expect it to be inevitable. Because Bailey Fengming had already planned everything. It's really a good move to use your strength to gain strength. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1003. Chapter 1003. Cao Lishan was taken away. Is there anyone interested in Tang Juwei? Fan Qinjiao knew that this man looked calm and composed, but if he hadn't really found out something, he would never sit here and chat with her. Bailey Fengming smiled calmly. Tang Juwei does have some skills and calculations. He has been deploying in the town these days. If the child is really caught by the third emperor brother, as long as he can secretly take it out of the palace after being sent to the town, no less than 10 people will take over, and finally send the child to the Taoist temple under the hunting forest. Fan Qinjiao's heart skipped a beat. He didn't expect that Tang Juwei would be so rigorous in his deployment in such a short period of time. It seems like it is a waste of time to rely on the help of 10 people, but in fact it is very thoughtful. After going around like this, even if one of them is caught afterwards, there is no way to reveal the whereabouts of the child. In order to do something completely unscrupulous, I really made it difficult for them. Fan Qinjiao frowned, with deep disgust in his eyes. In order to make the emperor immortal, countless innocent lives have been involved, but those people have no repentance at all and just involve more innocent people for their own interests. This kind of Bailey wrongs is far more cruel and disgusting than in the previous life. Bailey Fengming held her slightly cold hand and allowed her to lean on his shoulder comfortably. Today I am taking you out for a walk. If you want to play, don't think about it so much. Fan Qinjiao nodded. What happened has happened. No matter what she says now, it is impossible to bring those dead lives back to life. The only thing she can do now is to stabilize the moment, and then Bailey wrongs catch them all. This way, other innocent lives will not continue to die miserably. Because of the festival, the jubilant atmosphere in the town has not completely dissipated. When walking in the town, you can still see lanterns hanging everywhere. Although it is daytime, rows of lanterns form a dragon in mid-air. It is still very pleasing to the eye. Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming were walking on the small road in the town. They were surrounded by small stalls selling various gadgets. The bosses were shouting vigorously. People were passing by constantly, and people were constantly passing through the winding road. Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming held hands and walked slowly among them, looking at this and that from time to time, feeling rare and relaxed. At noon, Bailey Fengming took Fan Qinjiao into a tavern and ordered some of the famous vegetarian dishes. The two of them sat by the window, feeling indescribably warm. Soon, the whereabouts of Bailey Fengming and Fan Qinjiao were conveyed to the emperor's ears through Long Jian. Emperor Yongchang waved his hand, looked at Long Jian who was kneeling on the ground and said, "Go down." As Long Jian walked out of the hall silently, Bai Tu came over with a cup of tea. I really didn't expect that His Highness the Crown Prince would use such coaxing methods. As the saying goes, fighting at the bedside over the bed, so the emperor can feel at ease. Emperor Yongchang took the teacup and said, "Do you think I am worried about the prince and the princess?" Bai Tu quickly lowered his head and said, "The emperor was worried about the marriage of His Highness the Crown Prince. Others may not know it, but the servants can see it. The emperor is kind and hopes that His Highness the Crown Prince can marry the Crown Princess. Beautiful and harmonious." Emperor Yongchang was silent for a long time, and then he said with a smile, "You are becoming more and more tactful." Bai Tu bowed and said, "I don't dare to lie in front of the emperor. I tell the truth." As he was talking, he heard someone coming from outside to announce, "Your Majesty, the third prince wants to see you." The smile on Emperor Yongchang's face faded away. He looked at Bai Tu and said, "You go down first." Bai Tu didn't dare to stay here for a long time, so he hurriedly walked backwards towards the door. At the same time, he saw Bailey Wrongs walking into the hall. With just a stick of incense, the news of the third prince's request to see the emperor reached Bailey Fengming. Fan Qinjiao waited for Lin Yi to whisper to Bailey Fengming before asking, "What happened?" Bailey Fengming said truthfully, "Just now news came from the palace that the three emperor brothers met with the father." Fan Qinjiao frowned. the third prince's probing behavior has not stopped since he came to the palace. Normally, he cannot hide from the emperor, so why would he take the initiative to ask for an audience? Unless. Bailey Fengming continued, brother three emperors is probably going to take action. Fan Qinjiao nodded, there was only one reason that could make Bailey Rongs take the initiative to ask to see the emperor. Since they knew that Bailey Rongs was about to take action, Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming had no time to wander around anymore. The two of them returned to the palace after eating. Fan Qinjiao knew that Bailey Fengming had other things to arrange. After getting off the carriage, he walked to the place where he lived alone. Unexpectedly, as soon as he entered the yard, he saw Wu Qiuzhao hurriedly greeting him. Come over. Sister-in-law, you are finally back, Wu Qiuzhao said eagerly. Fan Qinjiao looked at Wu Qiuzhao and knew something was wrong, so he quickly asked, what's wrong? Wu Qiuzhao said, I saw that the weather was pretty good today, so I thought about going out with Cao Lishan, brother Ren and King Xin to sit in a nearby garden. Unexpectedly, I met Lu Shifei, and for some reason, Cao Lishan after bumping into concubine Lu Shu, concubine Lu took her away in anger, saying that she wanted to train him personally. Concubine Lu Shu? In my impression, this person is not a domineering person. Fan Qinjiao looked at Wu Qiuzhao and asked again, where are brother Ren and King Xin? Wu Qiuzhao said quickly, during nap, I was afraid of scaring the two children, so I lied and said that Cao Lishan followed concubine Lu Shu because of something. It's strange to say that concubine Lu Shu was obviously so angry, but she was still kind to brother Ren and King Xin. Okay, I didn't forget to give you a lot of candies before I left. Hearing these words, Fan Qinjiao's beating heart calmed down. Concubine Lu Shu just went to ask for an audience with the queen, and then she took Cao Lishan away in the garden. Although it seemed quite a coincidence, was it really such a coincidence? Fan Qinjiao understood everything when he thought that the queen already knew Cao Lishan's thoughts. As the mother of a country, it is impossible for the queen to be as knowledgeable as an unknown little girl. This will only lower her status, but it is different when concubine Lu Shu comes forward. Moreover, it was Cao Lishan who clashed with concubine Lu Shu first, so it was reasonable for concubine Lu to train her in private. Fan Qinjiao did not expect that the empress did not say anything on her face, but in her heart she had long wanted to help her vent her anger, and an indescribable warmth grew in her heart. Sister-in-law, there is no need to worry about this. Concubine Lu Shu is not unreasonable. She should send her back soon, Fan Qinjiao said. Wu Qiuzhao nodded. Since her sister-in-law said so, she felt relieved. Besides, after learning about Cao Lishan's thoughts, Cao Lishan's statement that she was not disgusted was lying. If Lu Shifei's hands could make Cao Lishan feel at ease, that would be a good idea. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1004. Chapter 1004. A chance encounter late at night. Lu Shifei has really been having a bad time during this period. Now that she has finally found a reason to vent her anger, she will not miss it. Looking at Cao Lishan in front of her, concubine Lu Shu asked coldly, I heard that you are the cousin of the crown princess. Cao Lishan was scared to death and quickly said, yes, I have a very good relationship with cousin Qinjiao, and cousin Qinjiao has always taken good care of me. Cousin Qinjiao took the initiative to take me with me when I came to the palace this time. Concubine Lu Shu raised her eyebrows, are you using your status as the crown princess to put pressure on me? Cao Lishan's legs softened and she knelt on the ground. Mom, please calm down, I didn't mean that. Concubine Lu Shu looked at Cao Lishan. She originally thought that Cao Lishan was a great person who dared to pursue the idea of the prince, but she didn't expect that he was so out of place, and the vulgar smell exuding from his body was even more unstoppable. Such a person is still trying to steal someone from the crown princess? simply overestimating one's capabilities. Since you are the cousin of the crown princess, you should not embarrass the crown princess. Today you bumped into me. If you bump into the queen in the future, even if you risk your life, it won't be enough for her. Lu Shifei looking at Cao Lishan, she said coldly. Cao Lishan knelt down and did not dare to raise her head, but she felt extremely wronged. It was clearly concubine Lu Shu who took the initiative to hit her, but now she insisted on blaming her. Could it be that this is the difference between power and status, so she was bullied? Can you just swallow your anger? Concubine Lu Shu didn't care what Cao Lishan was thinking. She looked at the palace attendants beside her and said, "Take her to the courtyard and watch her stand carefully. Such a frivolous temper needs to be changed." Yes. After receiving the order, the palace attendant turned around and dragged Cao Lishan out. Although the weather in autumn is not as sultry as the hot summer, the sunshine at this time is the most poisonous. Cao Lishan stood in the yard without any shade with the sun above her head, feeling burning pain all over her body. As he stood, his eyes soon turned black and his feet felt weak. When the palace attendant saw this, he brought a basin of cold water and poured it on Cao Lishan without saying a word. Cao Lishan was shocked by the cold, looked at the palace man and said, "You, what are you doing?" The palace man sneered and said, "Of course I want you to be in good spirits, girl." Looking at the sarcastic smile on the palace lady's face, Cao Lishan felt flushed and embarrassed, as if someone had stripped her naked. Pinching the hands under her sleeves, she remembered what Fan Swinning once told her. If you want to live a decent life, you must become a master. Thinking of this, Cao Lishan gritted her teeth. One day she would become the prince's woman. It was already evening when Fan Qinjiao received the message from concubine Lu Shu. Not only did concubine Lu send the message, she said that she had fallen in love with Cao Lishan and wanted to keep Cao Lishan at her place for a few more days. The palace people even sent a lot of jewelry. Sure enough, concubine Lu Shu is still good at being a good person. She secretly made things difficult for Cao Lishan, but openly gave Fan Qinjiao face. It's no wonder that Lu Shifei always wants to have both sides, because she is such a person. Fan Qinjiao certainly doesn't lack those jewelry, but since concubine Lu Shu knows how to be a good person, she still has to keep them. As soon as concubine Lu Shu's people were sent away, a palace official came in and said, to the crown princess, "The emperor just sent someone to convey that a banquet will be held at Ankang Palace at Shenxi tomorrow to make up for the regret of not having a reunion during the Mid-Autumn Festival." Fan Qinjiao's heart skipped a beat. The emperor would not throw a banquet out of the blue. He must have helped Bailey Rongs gather everyone together so that Bailey Rongs could secretly steal the child. Alchemy. What is supposed to come has finally come. After Fan Qinjiao sent the palace people away, he pulled Wu Kai's woe and said, "Tomorrow I will take Brother Ren and King Xin to the banquet. My sister-in-law will stay in this courtyard. Remember, no matter what you hear, don't go out and walk around casually." Although Wu Kaiozeo didn't know what happened, he still nodded and said, "Don't worry, sister-in-law." After Fan Qinjiao finished explaining Wu Kaiozeo, he went to the yard where Yan Hanbei was staying overnight. Although they had prepared in advance, it was unknown what situation would happen tomorrow. At this time, it was most important to stabilize people's hearts. Important. After leaving Yan Hanbei's place, Fan Qinjiao went to Han Jingchen's yard again. Han Jingchen's fever had subsided and she felt a lot more energetic. "It's hard for you to make this trip. Don't worry, I've been thinking about it these days. Since it's just a knife, there's nothing to be afraid of," Han Jingchen said with a smile. In the past, she fought with Fan Qinjiao because she had feelings for him, but after what happened to the second prince, she finally understood that in this environment where people cannibalize others, if you don't fight, you have to wait to be eaten. Just think about it. Remember to keep Yunjin with you at all times tomorrow. Although we are going to disrupt the third prince's plan tomorrow, Yunjin is the eldest grandson of the emperor and is far more troublesome than other children. Pay attention, Fan Kinjao warned. Once Bailey Rong's plan is disrupted, whether Bailey Rongs will become ill and seek medical treatment urgently, or whether he will be stable and not take action for the time being, these are all unpredictable things now. Moreover, now it is not only Bailey Rongs, but also Tang Juwei. This person is so unpredictable that Fan Kinjao really is not completely sure of how to predict Tang Juwei's reaction. Han Jingchen nodded and said, "Okay, I understand." Fan Kinjao saw that it was getting late, so he stood up and left, walking back along the spacious white brick road of the palace. Unexpectedly, he met Bailey Rongs just halfway through. On the quiet palace road, two people bumped into each other. Fan Kinjao stopped first and looked at Bailey Rongs and said proactively, "Your Highness." Bailey Rongs didn't expect to meet Fan Kinjao here. He glanced in the direction behind Fan Kinjao and then said with a smile, "Is the Crown Princess going to talk to the sixth princess? Tomorrow is the banquet, but I'm afraid that while everyone else is busy getting dressed, only the Crown Princess still has time to spend time with the sixth prince and concubine. Still trying to trick her at this time?" Fan Kinjao suppressed the disgust in his heart and said calmly, "The sixth prince and concubine were infected with wind and cold a few days ago. Tomorrow is the banquet. I have to go there in advance today to have a look. It's always hard to let the sixth prince and concubine be absent." "Yes." Bailey Rongs looked at Fan Kinjao's alienation from him to the point of disgust. Instead of leaving wisely, he took a step closer. "Although I don't know why the Crown Princess rejects me so much, in my heart I still hope to be with the Crown Prince. We have a good relationship with each other. Speaking of which, I was the first person to meet the Crown Princess, but I didn't expect that the Crown Princess would become farther and farther away from me in the end." While Bailey Rongs was speaking, he didn't forget to sigh, as if he had lost a treasure. In the last life, Bailey Rongs used this method to trick Fan Kinjao around, and finally ended up risking his own life and the lives of everyone around him. At that time, Fan Kinjao was really stupid, to be moved by such a hypocritical face. But now, Fan Kinjao just felt sick to his stomach when he looked at this face. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1005. Chapter 1005. I only want Fan Kinjao. Sometimes you still need to pay attention to fate. Maybe the fate between me and the Third Highness is only so much. Now that the Third Highness has a group of wives and concubines, you should cherish it. After Fan Kinjao finished speaking, he went directly to Bai Lirong. Zi walked over. With such a straight back and such an upright attitude, leaving Bailey Rongs behind was like throwing away garbage. She wanted to do this in the last life, but at that time she had already lost her legs due to the torture of fanswinning. Fortunately, in this life, she finally had such an opportunity. Bailey Rongs looked at Fan Kinjao's leaving figure. His face was not too ugly at all. Growing up, as long as he wanted something, he could always get it easily, whether it was his father's love or the rights that other princes did not have, but when it came to Fan Kinjao, he repeatedly hit the wall, every time kick on the iron plate. In fact, even Bailey Rongs couldn't figure out how he was worse than the prince. He returned to the yard where he lived with a dark face. Unexpectedly, he saw Tang Juwei waiting in the yard as soon as he entered the door. "Why are you here free, sir?" Bailey Rongs was still very polite when facing Tang Juwei. Without this person, he would not have been able to refine the elixir he did. Tang Juwei turned around at the sound, looked at Bailey Rongs and said, "Where did your highness hit a wall? His face doesn't look very good." Bailey Rongs lowered his eyes slightly. "It's just that I met an old friend." Tang Juwei didn't know how to get to the bottom of it, but looking at Bailey Rongs' expression, he could guess something. When he walked to Bailey Rongs' side, he said, "As long as the Third Highness completes this matter, the future will be unstoppable, it's limited. By then, what will the Third Highness want? Hearing these words, Bailey Rong's gloomy expression finally softened a little. Tang Juwei was right. As long as he sat on that chair, the prince would no longer be the prince. Fan Qinjiao had not married the prince yet, so naturally he was not a legitimate prince. By then, even if he didn't go to Fan Qinjiao, I'm afraid Fan Qinjiao would kneel in front of him and beg for his mercy. You must remember not to make any mistakes tomorrow. Please be careful, Your Highness. However, if I can really make Your Highness get what you want, I hope that Your Highness will promise me something, Tang Juwei said sadly. Smiled. Bailey Rongs knew the importance of Tang Juwei and nodded, just ask for whatever you want, sir. As long as I can achieve glory, wealth, power, and status, I will fully satisfy you. Tang Juwei looked at Bailey Rongs for a long time, but only said 3 words, Fan Qinjiao. Bailey Rongs was stunned, thinking he heard something wrong. What did you say, sir? Tang Juwei paused and said, people in the sect don't care about worldly things. I only want Fan Qinjiao, and I hope that His Highness can fulfill it. Bailey Rongs was stunned on the spot, obviously surprised. After a long while, he asked, Fan Qinjiao is just an ordinary woman. She is indeed smarter, but she has long been confused with the prince. Mr. Y give up everything else for Fan Qinjiao. Tang Juwei looked troubled and said with a smile, everyone has different ideas. What is important to the Third Highness is worthless to me. I hope the Third Highness can understand. Bailey Rongs wanted to say that he didn't understand, but he couldn't, let alone dare to say it. If he offended Tang Juwei now, then everything he had done before would be in vain. Although he was obsessed with Fan Qinjiao, but compared with the country in front of him, Bailey Rongs looked at Tang Juwei in silence for a long time, and finally nodded and said, Sir, don't worry, since it's what you want, I will definitely hold it with both hands. After Tang Juwei heard this, he smiled and said, everything is ready for tomorrow. Don't worry, Your Highness, the Emperor's body will collapse completely with just a few more pills. By that time, he will be so valued by the Emperor the Third Highness is determined to be the leader of the clan, but before that, the Third Highness still needs to figure out how to make the Emperor depose the Crown Prince while he is still alive. Bailey Rongs narrowed his eyes slightly. In order to let his father find a reason to depose the prince, he would dare to let people cause trouble in the main city on the 15th day. Unexpectedly, this matter has been shelved until now. This opportunity is rare. He must think carefully about how to defeat the enemy with one move. The next day arrived in the blink of an eye. Before Fan Qinjiao went out, Wu Qiuzhao specially put new clothes on Brother Ren and King Xin, and carefully combed their hair. When Fan Qinjiao held the 2 younger ones, he held one in his hand and the other in his arms. From a distance, it looked like he was carrying 2 boys giving money. Since the Emperor has decreed that today's banquet is a family banquet to make up for the Mid-Autumn Festival, according to etiquette, Fan Qinjiao cannot take the children directly to the main hall where the banquet is held, but must first pay respects to the Queen. All the way to the Queen's palace, Lily was waiting at the door to greet her. Before leading Fan Qinjiao in, she reminded her in a low voice, Prince, please be careful, Princess Yunyu is here too. Fan Qinjiao thought thoughtfully, the Queen is the master of the harem, and all the children in the harem must call the Queen mother, but today has already passed the Mid-Autumn Festival, and Yunyu is not the Queen's biological child, even if she does not come to say hello. Can't fault anything. But Yunyu came anyway. Sure enough, no one can compare to Princess Yunyu in terms of skill. Fan Qinjiao thought to himself. When he entered the hall, he saw Princess Yunyu sitting under the Empress. She didn't know what she was saying. Both the Empress and Yunyu had thick smiles on their faces. It looked like it really seems to be very harmonious. Fan Qinjiao put King Xin on the ground, intending to salute and say hello. Unexpectedly, King Xin walked in front of the Empress in one step and fell on the Empress's lap. King Xin has been walking around with Yu frequently during this period, and she is naturally very familiar with the Queen. In addition, the Queen has always loved King Xin, and now that King Xin has met the Queen, she will not recognize her. Empress Zhen 11 smiled and bent over to hold King Xin in her arms. She nodded the tip of King Xin's nose and said, "How long has it been since we last seen each other that you started acting like a baby?" He looked up at the Queen with all his heart and said inarticulately, I want to. It was a joy to be remembered by a child. Empress Zhen 11 smiled with her eyebrows arched, "This child is sensible, so the pain is not in vain." Yunyu looked at the Queen's coquettish and rolling King Xin from the side, and felt a sense of contempt in her heart. She had learned the ability to please people at such a young age. As expected, like sisters. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1006. Chapter 1006, A Slap in the Face. Fan Kinjao didn't notice Yunyu's expression. He sat aside with Brother Ren in his arms and said, "Today's banquet, the Queen Mother also plans to bring Princess Yunyu with her." Queen Zhen 11 nodded and said, "We have already ordered people to dress up Yunyu." Speaking of Yunyu, she has never participated in such an occasion. Now it is good to gain some experience in advance. Yunyu smiled after hearing this and said, "The Queen likes to worry about us younger generations, but Yunyu is still young and may not understand the Queen's painstaking efforts. I am here to thank the Queen for her troubles on behalf of Yunyu. Yunyu and Yunyu are both princesses, that is, sisters. As a sister, Yunyu is understandable in saying thank you on her behalf. But Fan Kinjao remembers that since Princess Yunyu returned to the palace, even Yunyu's face has changed. I have never seen him once, so it would be too hypocritical to say so now. To put it bluntly, don't you want to take advantage of the opportunity to please the Queen?" Yunyu looked at Fan Kinjao again and said, "Speaking of which, Yunyu is my sister, and that one is the princess's sister. I heard that the two of them had a lot of fun. It's really fate, but after all, Yunyu's identity is at stake. There, the crown princess's sister still has to bow and greet Yunyu, otherwise it would be bad if she gets criticized, right?" When Yunyu said this, the smile on her face never broke, but the words she spoke were extremely harsh. If it comes to status, King Xin is not worthy of standing with the princess, but the children are still young and they are in the palace, so no one will really ask the children for anything. But what Yunyu said now was clearly to ridicule Fan Kinjao for deliberately letting King Xin please Yunyu, and to force Fan Kinjao to make King Xin kneel down and kowtow to Yunyu. If you really do this, it will not only frighten King Xin and Yunyu, but also alienate the relationship between them. Fan Kinjao has always known that Yunyu is good at calculations, but he didn't expect that he would have such no bottom line and would not let go of even a child of several years old. Empress Zhen 11 also frowned when she heard what Yunyu said, but Yunyu didn't say anything out of the ordinary, and it was hard for her to reprimand her. Yunyu could not let Yunyu catch her partiality. Just at this time, Yunyu walked in under the guidance of the palace servants. Today Yunyu put on a pair of fiery red clothes, which made her face look fairer and pinker. Yunyu was happy when she saw Fan Kinjao, and then she saw Qing Xian in the Queen's arms. She walked over and took Qing Xian's hand. As for Yunyu who was sitting beside her, Yunyu couldn't even look at her. Didn't even take a look. Yunyu, who just said that she and Yunyu were sisters, seemed a little embarrassed. Fan Kinjao looked at Yunyu who calmly lowered her eyes to hide her embarrassment, and sneered in her heart. "It's too early to feel embarrassed now. Because she will make Yunyu even more embarrassed. Fan Kinjao stood up and walked to Yunyu's side, stretching out his hand to Yunyu. When Yunyu saw that the person coming was Fan Kinjao, he did not reject it at all. He stretched out his chubby arms and hugged Fan Kinjao's neck. Let Fan Kinjao hold her in his arms. Yunyu was shocked when she saw this. It is said that Yunyu's temperament is very weird. Except for the people from the queen's side, it is difficult for anyone in the entire harem to get close to her. I didn't expect that she was so close to Fan Kinjao. Just as he was thinking about it, he saw Fan Kinjao walking over with Yunyu in his arms. Yunyu looked at Yunyu in front of her and said something bad, but even if she was alert, it was already too late, because Fan Kinjao was holding Yunyu and said, "This is Princess Yunyu's sister, Princess Yunyu, you can't deny it when you see it." In Yunyu's knowledge, there was no Yunyu at all, so how could they recognize each other now? The arms holding Fan Kinjao's neck tightened, and the whole person was buried in Fan Kinjao's arms. "Point your towards Yunyu." Yunyu hurriedly said, "I have long heard that Yunyu's temperament is relatively easygoing, so why does the crown princess have to force others to do something difficult?" Fan Kinjao laughed when he heard this. Just now, Princess Yunyu was only thinking about Princess Yunyu, and she planned to let King Xin kneel down and salute when she meets Princess Yunyu. Princess Yunyu misses Princess Yunyu so much. Princess Yunyu must understand Princess Yunyu's intention. Yunyu. If Fan Kinjao doesn't speak, will he die? Of course Fan Kinjao will not die. But Fan Kinjao would never let others throw sand into her eyes. Since Yunyu took the initiative to cause trouble, she should be prepared to be provoked. If she ridiculed her sister in front of her, did she really think that she, Fan Kinjao, was just a decoration? Yunyu is young, but she still understands some things that should be understood. After listening to Fan Kinjao's words, Yunyu was silent for a long time, then struggled to fall from Fan Kinjao's body to the ground, and turned to look at Yunyu. Yunyu really didn't know what Yunyu was going to do, and she was embarrassed by her, but she couldn't really get up and leave. She could only bite the bullet and extend her hand to Yunyu and said, "Yunyu, I am yours." Snap dash. Before Yunyu could finish her words, a fleshy little hand slapped her in the face. Yunyu was stunned, and her expression changed again and again on the spot. Queen Zhen 11 almost laughed out loud when she saw this. Sure enough, Xiao Kinjao had an idea. She borrowed Yunyu's hand and slapped Yunyu the face. Since Yunyu was deeply in love with Yunyu's sisters one by one, no matter how angry you are in your heart, you have to endure it on your face. But thinking so, Queen Zhen 11 pretended to scold her and said, "Yunyu must not be rude." Yunyu looked aggrieved when she was yelled at by the Empress, and turned around and threw herself into Fan Kinjao's arms. Fan Kinjao stood up while holding Yunyu in his arms and said, "Where is Princess Yunyu injured? Princess Yunyu is still young. Princess Yunyu must not be the same as her." Queen Zhen 11 said, "Even if Yunyu is young, she cannot break the rules. If she makes a mistake, she will be punished." Fan Kinjao quickly looked at the queen and said, "Mother, please calm down." Yunyu looked at the queen and Fan Kinjao, who were singing the oboe in front of her, and her ears were buzzing with anger. If the queen really punished Yunyu, not to mention that the queen would not be cruel at all. Once this matter gets out, won't she become a narrow-minded person? "Mother, calm down, the princess is right, Yunyu is still young and is fine." Yunyu stood up with anger in her heart, and knelt on the ground with Fan Kinjao to plead with Yunyu. Queen Zhen 11 looked at Yunyu and said, "I am very relieved that Princess Yunyu has such a big heart." Then she looked at Yunyu and said, "Why don't you thank your sister quickly?" Yunyu snorted and continued to face Yunyu with her butt. "Yunyu, if you didn't get mad to death on the spot, you are young and in good health." End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1007. Chapter 1007 is really unexpected. Yunya came today with the intention of secretly keeping an eye on the queen. After all, today was a very important day for them, and they couldn't bear the slightest mistake. But now that Yunya made such a fuss, Yunya continuing to stay with the Empress is simply sitting on pins and needles. But what if it hurts again? You have to bite the bullet and continue to sit here, looking at Yunya, and her nose is not a nose, and her eyes are not eyes from time to time. What made Yunya vomit blood the most was that Fan Kinjao was pretending to be confused. It was obviously her fault, but now he looked innocent and looked at her helplessly and apologetically from time to time. How innocent! Fortunately, the difficult moments always passed, and finally when it was time for the banquet, Queen Zhen 11 walked out of the palace with Yuanyu in her arms, and Fan Kinjao followed behind with Brother Ren and King Xin. Yuanyu originally wanted to follow the Empress, but when she thought of Yuanyu in the Empress's arms, she got nervous and deliberately fell a few steps behind. She was facing Fan Kinjao, Brother Ren, and King Xin again. With 6 pairs of eyes, whether it was an illusion or something, Yuanyu felt that the eyes of Brother Ren and King Xin were looking at her so unkindly. The sharp edge of what he did pierced his back, and it felt like it was stuck in his throat. I'm afraid it was nothing more than that. Ankang Palace has already been brightly lit, and families are gathering together with their children. Even before the emperor arrived, the kids from each family had relaxed a bit and were running back and forth in the hall in groups, their unrestrained laughter never ending. As the queen sat down, Fan Kinjao also came to the seat with his 2 children. Han Jingchen, Yan Hanbei, and the 8th prince had already arrived early, and their faces were full of joy when they saw Fan Kinjao coming over. Smile. Yun Jin may have developed a revolutionary friendship with Ren Gear during the last war. The 2 of them got together as soon as they met. King Xin also got together with them out of curiosity. The 3 little guys were mumbling something unknown. Yan Hanbei looked at the daughter in his arms and said, "You have to grow up quickly." Fan Kinjao smiled when he heard this and said, "Everyone wants their children to grow up slower so that they can be around them more. How can anyone tell their children to grow up quickly?" Yan Hanbei rolled his eyes. "You don't know how annoying it is to hold a child in your arms." The 8th prince's concubine said enviously, "No matter how hard you try, it's all the meat that falls from your own body. It's not like me. Even if I want to be tired, I don't have that blessing." Fan Kinjao thought about the 8th prince who was sent to the border by Bailey Fengming. He looked at the 8th prince and comforted him, "The 8th prince will always come back for the new year this year. If you are serious about it, just hurry up." When I chatted with my 4th uncle last time, I also talked about the 8th prince. Fan Kinjao did not expect that such a wild and untamable 8th prince would now get along very harmoniously with his uncles. Since the 8th prince is no longer in danger, thinking about it, Bailey Fengming would not keep the 8th prince outside all the time, so he still needed to give him some sweetness. The 8th princess did not expect to hear such good news, and she was really happy from the bottom of her heart. Han Jingchen suddenly bumped Fan Kinjao's arm with her arm, raised her chin towards the door of the hall, and saw concubine Han Xian and concubine Panda entering the door majestically. Yan Hanbei frowned and said, "Now that the emperor attaches great importance to the 3rd prince, even these people's tails are raised to the sky. Looking at their appearance, they should be fully confident tonight." Fan Kinjao said, "I'm afraid they may not know such a secret thing. They are so arrogant now, but they just feel that the emperor has recently paid more attention to the 3rd prince than the prince." Han Jingchen whispered, "So they were not very miserable. In the end, they didn't even know how they died?" Fan Kinjao didn't think so. People's choices are all made by themselves. Moreover, concubine Han Xian and concubine Panda followed concubine Yu and did a lot of dirty things. If they really got retribution, they deserved it. "What's going on with the 6th prince?" Fan Kinjao asked softly. Han Jingchen lowered her voice again, Don't worry, I dragged him all night last night, and now even for the head on his neck, he doesn't dare to make any mistakes. Fan Kinjao clicks, nodding. This sudden arrival at the palace disrupted all their original plans. The most important thing tonight was the fourth uncle and the sixth prince. As long as they could hold on, half the battle was won. The emperor is here. With a shout from the door, the hall instantly became quiet. Everyone quickly pressed their little cub beside them and knelt on the ground to welcome the emperor's arrival. Long live the emperor, long live the emperor. With the support of Baitu, Emperor Yongchang sat down next to the empress, then waved his hands and said, "Sit down." Everyone stood up slowly and sat on their seats one after another. Emperor Yongchang looked around, but concubine Yu's seat was still empty. Seeing this, Yunyu stood up and said, "Father, I don't know. Yesterday, my mother and concubine left the younger members of the Yu family in the palace and listened to them composing poems until late at night. I'm afraid I got up a little late today. I hope your father will forgive me crime." Emperor Yongchang thought for a while and said, "But that Yu Ziming from the Yu family." Yunyu smiled and nodded, "Father is wise." When everyone heard this, the expressions on their faces seemed a little better. Yu Ziming and Yu Ziying of the Yu family are completely different. I heard that Yu Ziming was good at reciting poems at a young age. Concubine Yu even brought him to the emperor some time ago. I don't know what poems Yu Ziming wrote, which brought the emperor to the throne. He was so coaxed that he kept praising him. Although Yu Ziming was not born to concubine Yu, he was still a member of the Yu family and was concubine Yu's nephew. Concubine Yu waited until the end before bringing Yu Ziming here in person, just to show off and pass along the other children. They were all crushed. As soon as Yunyu sat down, concubine Yu came in with Yu Ziming. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a milky voice rang out, "The person sitting at the top is different from us." No wonder everyone dared not speak when he opened his mouth. The originally silent hall became even quieter as a chicken when this voice sounded. Everyone subconsciously looked at their own little kid, fearing that it was their own child who didn't understand the rules. As a result, everyone looked around, and finally their eyes fell on Ren Geer. Fan Kinjao. This is really unexpected. Ren Geer was feeling uncomfortable when so many people were looking at him. He pulled Yun Jin beside him and said, "What did I say? Why are they all looking at me?" At this moment, Yun Jin, whose sleeve was being pulled by Ren Geer, felt like there were really 10,000 grass mud horses running wildly in his heart. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1008. Chapter 1008. Brother Ren is in trouble. Yunjin was about to cry whenever she faced Ren Geer's innocent face again. "It's okay for you to talk nonsense, why are you dragging me down?" Hearing the voice, Emperor Yongchang also cast his gaze on Ren Geer. He looked at Ren Geer and said, "Which family are you a child of? Do you know that people are not allowed to talk casually in this hall?" Brother Ren trembled at the emperor's gaze. He quickly walked to Fan Kinjao's side, pulled Fan Kinjao's sleeve and said aggrievedly, "Little aunt, I'm afraid." Fan Kinjao. Now you know what's the use of fear? Emperor Yongchang looked in the direction of Fan Kinjao. Only then did he realize the identity of Brother Ren. He looked at Fan Kinjao and asked, "Is this your brother's child?" Fan Kinjao stood up hurriedly, pulled Brother Ren along with him and saluted, "That's right, I'm going back to my father." Ren Geer's head was being pressed hard by his little aunt, and he felt like he couldn't breathe. However, he had never seen his little aunt with such a serious look on his face, and he didn't dare to move around anymore. Emperor Yongchang had no intention of continuing to speak, and let Fan Kinjao and Ren Geer kneel on the ground with their heads lowered with unclear expressions. It suddenly became quiet in the main hall. Queen Zhen 11 seemed to be sitting there with concern, but in fact she was already secretly studying the emperor's expression, and began to think about how to help Fan Qingjao escape. Bailey Rongs looked at Bailey Fengming from time to time. In the end, he simply offered tea instead of wine in front of Bailey Fengming, speaking of which, it's been a long time since I drank with the prince. I managed to set up a trap last time there was a banquet, but the prince only focused on traveling with the princess. Bailey Fengming didn't want to show up. Firstly, he couldn't really show his importance to Ayao in front of his father. Secondly, Ayao probably didn't need him to show up for such a trivial matter. Now Bailey Rongs is even talking about his close relationship with Ayao in the name of drinking tea. Intentionally or unintentionally, Bailey Fengming is naturally not allowed to do anything. If I knew that the heirs of the Yu family would have such a big prejudice against the Hua family, I should have suggested that the crown princess go there. It might also ease the rift between the Hua family and the Yu family. Bailey Fengming raised the teacup and said calmly. Bailey Rongs' hand holding the teacup was stiff. He didn't expect Bailey Fengming to poke his painful spot as soon as he opened his mouth. That day Fan Qingjao rushed in and slapped Yu Ziying on the face without saying a word. Although it was Yu Ziying who was slapped, how could he care about his face? Now the prince actually regretted not letting Fan Qingjao attend the banquet, saying that it would ease the relationship between the two families. According to him, the prince simply hated Fan Qingjao for not whipping him as well. What happened in the past is in the past. If the crown prince is serious about it, I will hold a banquet in a few days. But until then, the crown prince will not have to stay and fly with the crown princess again, Bailey Rongs said with a smile. In terms of hypocrisy, no one can compare with him. Bailey Fengming suddenly showed a hint of sadness. I accept Brother Three Emperor's wishes. However, I have been different from Brother Three Emperors since I was a child. I have always liked peace and quiet. Bailey Rongs. There is no way to talk today, right? He relied on the fact that his mother-in-law was concubine Yu, and she had been favored by her father since she was a child. It was originally a secret that everyone knew, but now when Bailey Fengming said it, it was clear that he pushed for the moral kidnapping of monopolizing his favor and disregarding his brothers and sisters. Just imagine, how can a person who doesn't even care about his brother's feelings become a kind and wise king in the future? Sitting in the main hall this time, there were not only people from the third prince's party, but also many who had never taken sides until now. Although the ministers present pretended not to hear Bailey Fengming's words, in fact, who in their hearts it's not about analyzing the pros and cons over and over again. Bailey Rongs resisted the urge to vomit blood, drank all the tea in the cup, and simply closed his mouth. Bailey Fengming said with a smile, "Is it possible that Brother Three Emperors didn't continue my conversation just as I was getting excited?" Bailey Rongs. What to continue? If he continues, he will really vomit blood. However, seeing that Bailey Fengming did not pay attention to Fan Qingjao, Bailey Rongs was still a little happy in his heart. He just wanted to show Fan Qingjao the man she wanted to marry. That's all. When in times of crisis, why don't you just sit back and act like a turtle? While everyone was listening to the conversation between the crown prince and the third prince, they were all secretly looking at the emperor. The main hall is large, but did the emperor really not hear the Tai Chi match between the third prince and the prince? I'm afraid that may not be the case. But now the emperor has no intention of stopping it, which makes it even more difficult to guess what the emperor is thinking. Yunyu didn't know that Bailey Rongs was actually sowing discord. Seeing that Bailey Rongs lost to the prince verbally, she was holding a ball of fire in her heart. At this time, Han Jingchen, who happened to be on the side, couldn't sit still. He moved his body and stood up to intercede for Fan Qingjao and Brother Ren. Seeing this, Yunyu said before Han Jingchen got up, "I have always heard that the sixth prince and the crown prince have a close relationship. It seems that the crown prince really cares about the people around her. It's just that the child is ignorant. The 6 princes and concubines are all you are a mother, why do you still have the same mentality as a child?" Yunyu had a smile on her face and looked like she was joking, but Han Jingchen almost exploded when she heard this. Who do you think is a toothless child? But with Yunyu's words here, Han Jingchen had to sit back down no matter how much she tried to get up. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a clear admission that no one who has anything to do with Fan Qinjiao knows etiquette? In front of the emperor, it is a small thing to be ignorant of etiquette. If you are labeled as disrespectful or disrespectful, your head will be lost. Princess Yunyu, I don't know. Some people just like to do whatever they want with the help of those in high positions. They are used to putting on pretense, but now they don't know how big or small they are unconsciously. They even forget what occasion they are on. Guan Pan'er picked up a rare joke and naturally laughed along with it. Yunyu looked at Guan Pan'er and pretended not to understand. I didn't understand what the third princess said. Guan Pan'er really thought that Yunyu didn't understand what she meant, so she paused and said, I heard that the former third prince's concubine was depressed all day long. I guess it was because she was not in harmony with her sisters-in-law, nor was she happy. I know how much sulking the former third prince concubine endured before she passed away. After all, people who were close friends with the crown princess are not old enough, so they don't know how to be humble. This means that Pan Yulu's death is all blamed on Fan Qinjiao. Han Jingchen was so angry that she gritted her teeth. One was Yunyu, who pretended to be confused, and the other was Guan Pan'er, who loaded up his gun and ran away. If these two were allowed to continue talking, how would Qinjiao have a good reputation? But if she really wants to fight Yunyu, Han Jingchen still has to think about it. Yunyu is concubine Yu's daughter after all. Don't let her talk for a while now and cause even greater trouble for Qinjiao later. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1009. Chapter 1009, Defeat and Success. At the critical moment, Yan Hanbei looked at Guan Pan'er and frowned and said, all she talks about is the former third prince and concubine. On such a day of family reunion, the third prince and concubine should worry about other people's feelings even if she is not afraid of bad luck, right? Guan Pan'er didn't expect that Yan Hanbei would directly fire at her. She was stunned for a while. It took her a long time before she choked and said, I'm just telling the truth. Could it be that Princess Pinglai has a guilty conscience? Yan Hanbei let out a hee-hee. She was never afraid of quarreling with others. The third prince's concubine said this as if she had seen it with her own eyes, but how could I remember that there was no third prince's concubine at that time? Or is it that the third prince's concubine opened up the coffin of the former third prince's concubine and heard what the third prince's concubine told you with her own ears? Guan Pan'er. It really made the hairs on my hair stand on end. Guan Pan'er's face turned blue, and she reluctantly wanted to continue speaking, but looking at Yan Hanbei's face, she swallowed the words that came to her lips. When she was a girl, she didn't quarrel with the sisters in the house, but they quarreled. How could she tell ghost stories, by the way? You are quarreling and trying to scare people. What are you doing? How come the people around Fan Qinjiao are so hateful? Yan Hanbei looked at Guan Pan'er, who was dying, and curled his lips coldly. I can't fight against Princess Yunyu, so I can't fight against you anymore? You are smart enough not to keep arguing with me, otherwise I will dig out all the ancestral graves of your Guan family in a while. When Han Jingchen saw this, she quietly gave Han Jingchen a thumbs up. At that time, she only thought about the overall situation, but she did not expect to directly separate Yunyu and Guan Pan'er. Now Han Jingchen only scolds Guan Pan'er for not mentioning anything about Yunyu. Yunyu always likes to pretend to be a good person, and even if she wanted to speak at this time, she would not find a chance. Sure enough, Sometimes it's Han Jingchen's straightforward temperament that makes it more fun to quarrel with others. Fan Qinjiao knelt on the ground with Brother Ren. He heard voices coming from all directions, and quietly looked at the emperor's expression. Seeing that the emperor still had no intention of speaking, he actually had a plan in mind. It is estimated that this is the first time for the emperor to encounter such a thing. The emperor has many heirs, but whether he is a prince or a princess, he has been instilled by the palace officials from the moment he was born that his father is the king of a country and cannot be disobeyed. In this way, the prince and princess face the emperor's influence. At that time, I would not treat him as a father. It is precisely because of this that the emperor has never enjoyed the true happiness of a family. Now Brother Ren suddenly said something indiscriminately. Although it was against the rules, the emperor knew that it was not a big deal. However, if he punished Brother Ren, it would appear that he was too mean. If he did not punish him, it would not reflect the emperor's dignity. Majesty. So this is the difficulty. To put it bluntly, the emperor just wanted to think about how to deal with this matter through other people's reactions. Fan Qinjiao felt confident and didn't panic. He deliberately patted Brother Ren on the head and showed a comforting smile. Rengeir looked at his little ant and whispered, "Little ant, did I do something wrong? I want to call the emperor father, and Brother Ren calls me little ant. Although the emperor is not related to us by blood, we still have family ties." Fan Qinjiao smiled on his face, but in fact he was secretly seducing. Whether he can escape smoothly this time still depends on Brother Ren. After hearing this, Brother Ren's black eyes started to roll. After a long while, his eyes widened. He looked at the emperor and shouted, "So, the emperor is the grandfather of Brother Ren." As soon as these words came out, not to mention everyone was stunned, even the emperor was confused. After a long while, Emperor Yongchang looked at Rengeir and asked, "You are not my grandson, how can you call me master?" Rengeir raised his cheeks. Although he was a little scared, he still puffed up his chest and explained, "My father, I was once told that if you meet an elder from outside the family, the generation can actually be arranged according to the family. Grandpa Huang is my aunt's father-in-law, so there is a gap in the generation between me and Grandpa Huang. I know that Grandpa Huang and there is no blood connection, so I call you Grandpa Huang, not Grandpa Huang. Oh, and you even called out the emperor's grandpa. It doesn't count as taking advantage of the emperor, right?" Everybody sitting below wiped their sweat together. Who would have thought that we would hear such remarks that transcend cognition in our lifetime? This courage. It's really a match for the crown princess. But just when everyone was thinking whether the emperor would be angry, they saw Emperor Yongchang looking at Brother Ren and saying, "So, if I ask you to kneel on the ground, it's my fault, right?" Rengeir's little head is filled with great wisdom. "My little ant knelt down, so I naturally knelt down too. Although I don't know where I went wrong, my little ant and I are a family, and our blood is thick. In water, we share will and woe. If you really offend Grandpa Huang, I will kowtow to Grandpa Huang here." Rengeir's words were not very clear, but when he kowtowed, he was absolutely unambiguous. One head after another, they banged their heads against the bricks of the main hall. That is called sincerity. Emperor Yongchang has lived for almost a lifetime and has no shortage of sons and daughters. However, because he is in the royal family, the relationship between flesh and blood has always been pitiful. In addition, he no longer trusts anyone at all, so he has long forgotten it. What should it be like between relatives? Now looking at Rengeir with a sincere face and a pure heart, although Emperor Yongchang couldn't say he was very touched, it would be false to say that he didn't have any yearning for him. He was not very angry with Rengeir in the first place, but now he couldn't even get angry at all. "What is your name?" Emperor Yongchang asked again. Brother Ren replied seriously. Emperor Yongchang said, "Oh," looked at Brother Ren and waved, "Come here." Rengir subconsciously looked at Fan Kinjao. Little ant, can I go? Go. Fan Kinjao naturally nodded. She originally seduced Rengir because she wanted to make him talk freely, so that the emperor could pursue the shortcomings in his heart. As long as the emperor was moved, Rengir and she would naturally be safe. By now, Empress Zhen 11 had understood Fan Kinjao's plan. She looked in the direction of her son and breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. Bailey Fengming had an indifferent look on his face. His Ayao has always been so smart, hasn't he? Queen Zhengzi. You are said to be fat, but you are still breathing heavily. Rengir staggered towards the emperor, but if he wanted to really get to the emperor's side, there were still several steps to take. For Rengir's height, it was simply a hurdle. When Queen Zhen 11 saw this, she wanted someone to pick up Brother Ren, but before she could say anything, Yunyu just smiled and said, "Such a smart child, such a small difficulty is naturally difficult living." End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 1010. Chapter 1010. This kid is too good at talking, right? Anyone with ears can hear this, and it's clear that he is in trouble. But by chance, Queen Zhen 11's hand was held by a big hand next to her. As soon as Queen Zhen 11 raised her head, she saw the emperor looking at Brother Ren with an unfinished expression, obviously wanting to see if Brother Ren could come up with a solution on his own. Queen Zhengzi. It's rare to have a bit of humanity, but not much. Yunyu didn't believe that a half-year-old child could really come up with any ideas. She just wanted to show her father that everything was just taught by Fan Kinjao in private. At this moment, Fan Kinjao looked in the direction of Princess Yunyu. Yunyu met Fan Kinjao's gaze. Although the pride mixed in her smile was not obvious, it could not be concealed. And Fan Kinjao suddenly laughed too. Yunyu was stunned for a moment, wondering what the smile meant, when she suddenly heard an exclamation in the hall. When Yunyu turned around and looked around, she saw Rengir climbing up the first step on his hands and knees. Although his movements were a bit ugly, this method was still very practical. Fan Kinjao watched as the smile on Yunyu's face faded little by little, and slowly lowered her eyes. She was indeed seducing Brother Ren just now, but Brother Ren was not a stupid child. Otherwise, how could one understand her temptation? Rengir climbed very slowly, but the emperor was interested. Now everyone had to sit with him because of Rengir. Yunyu watched the food in front of her go cold little by little. This time she dug a hole to bury herself. With great difficulty, Brother Ren arrived in front of the emperor. His forehead was already sweating, but he still stood upright and said, "Grandpa Emperor, Brother Ren is here." Emperor Yongchang didn't expect that the child didn't complain at all, but was stunned. Empress Zhen 11 smiled coldly in her heart. She had lived for most of her life, but she still had no children. It's really ridiculous. It was probably Rengir's sincerity that really moved Emperor Yongchang. He simply handed the whole plate of pastries in front of him to Rengir. "Grandpa Huang, there are pastries here that you don't have. Take these back and eat them slowly." Rengir looked at the pastries on the plate, but he didn't take them all away. Instead, he picked a few pieces and put them into his sleeves. Emperor Yongchang looked curious and asked, "What are you doing?" Little Ant said that greed is insatiable, and it is best for people to be content with what they have. "I will eat a piece for myself, and then give a piece to Brother Yunjin and Sister Yuanyu. The princess and Sister Kingzin are too young to eat these. It will choke them," Brother Ren said truthfully. Emperor Yongchang laughed a few times, then looked at Fan Kinjao and said, "Okay, stop kneeling." Everyone saw Fan Kinjao getting up, and they felt mixed emotions in their hearts. Surely this child was not taught word by the crown princess? Otherwise, how could you please the emperor so much? Even all the emperor's biological princes in the palace combined, none of them are as sweet-talking as this one. The second prince looked at Rengir, who was standing in front of the emperor and holding the pastries seriously. He couldn't tell how painful he was. If something hadn't happened to the second prince's concubine, his son would have died soon. Bailey Rongs noticed the second prince's expression and immediately looked away. Just at this time, someone outside sent a message, "Concubine Yu has arrived." As the words fell, Concubine Yu was seen holding Yu Ziming's hand and entering the main hall. Concubine Yu specially came the latest, just to let the emperor pay more attention to the heirs of the Yu family, but who would have thought that as soon as she entered the door, she saw it was Brother Ren who sucked all the emperor's attention away. The smile on Concubine Yu's face froze. She walked all the way here specifically for the finale. In the end, this is what she was given? Yu Ziming recognized Brother Ren at a glance. Isn't that the prince's nephew? Concubine Yu. As long as you are related to Fan Kinjao, nothing good will happen. A few days ago, my mother and concubine praised Yu Ziming for being a good couple. I didn't expect that she would be so obsessed with it that she almost missed the banquet. Yunyu stood up with a smile, clearly telling the world that the Yu family has an heir. Erudite and talented, he can win the attention of the imperial concubine at a young age. This is exactly why Yunyu deliberately mentioned Yu Ziming in front of the emperor just now. To put it bluntly, we are just paving the way for the present. As long as he gets the emperor's praise, it's a small thing to look up to Yu Ziming, but it's a big thing to send his own child to be a companion for Yu Ziming. Bailey Rongs can take the opportunity to continue to win over the courtiers. The younger ones are all here as companion readers. How can the older ones be distracted? It's a pity that the emperor's attention is now firmly controlled by Ren Geer. The courtiers sitting here have heard about Yu Zing, and some of them want to take this opportunity to recommend themselves and let their grandchildren serve as Yu Zing's companions. But now, looking at the emperor's attitude, they still recommend themselves. A belly full of ink is worse than half a tail of honey in the mouth. Look at the child from the Hua family coaxing the emperor so much that he can't even look away. Yunyu did not expect that she had paved the road in advance, but now it suddenly collapsed. Seeing the facial expressions of the ministers present, she was a little confused about what to do. How could Queen Zhen 11 not see the little thoughts in Concubine Yu's heart? She smiled and said, "Concubine Yu came a little late. Fortunately, the heirs of the Hua family are pestering the emperor. Concubine Yu should hurry up and take a seat." Concubine Yu looked at Queen Zhen 11 with a pair of knives in her eyes. Listen to what the queen said. Do you still want me to thank a child who has no respect for his elders and no rules? As soon as these words came out, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Now that the crown prince and the third prince are equal, it is reasonable for Concubine Yu to look down on the crown princess, but she did not expect that Concubine Yu would directly attack the child. There is no respect for one's superiors and no rules. Once this hat is firmly on the head, it will take a beating to get rid of the problem. Concubine Yu's words are serious. It's rare for the emperor to fall in love with the heirs of the Hua family. Why should Concubine Yu care about a child? Now everyone is sitting here just for a relaxing reunion. Concubine Yu can't bear to disturb everyone's interest. Bar. Empress Zhen 11's words were obviously much harsher than those of Concubine Yu. The reason why everyone is gathered here today is to have a relaxing meal, not to watch you hit a child with a stick. Of course, if you want to fight, I will not stop you. As long as you are willing to put on the hat of being mean and not caring about what others think, you can fight as you like. Beat with open arms. End of this chapter.